Right, welcome to the subject of conservation development. These are some examples of conservation development, new urbanism, and eco-villages that I have visited and have studied with some great interest in my travels over the past few years that I'd like to share with you today. We'll start off with Prairie Crossing in Grayslake, Illinois, a master plan by SOM and Calthorpe Associates. Very interesting example of conservation development, and that we're dealing with what was primarily a greenfield site, but doing a development that restores a portion of the existing family farm, as well as adding or restoring portions of the native prairie. This is located north of the Chicagoland, northwest of Chicagoland, in the Chicago metro region. There is a Metra station, part of the Metra system, right to the south side of the site, with service to downtown Chicago. Wisconsin border is just to the north, and the suburbs of Evanston, Skokie, and Glencoe are to the south and east. But it's an interesting development pattern in the sense that there are clusters and lines of residential development, an enclosure of retention and lakes, enclosure and retention of the existing family farm, future school site, future hospital sites, and future development on all four sides of the development. A very interesting notion of density and clustering and of open space preservation. As we look a little bit closer at the plan provided by SOM and Calthorpe, we can see a tremendous amount of open space, farmland, intended to be tillable farmland, as well as additional field lots, the original farmstead, and other original farmsteads, as well as wetlands and lakefront, which creates different situations for each of the clusters. The first cluster to the north, the larger meadow lot in the middle, the village green, the prairie lots, and then the station village, the densest part of the development, closest to the metro station or commuter line that has service to Chicago. A few numbers in terms of numbers of field lots, in terms of lot sizes. This is all accessible from the Prairie Crossing website, which has a copy of their original 1994 master plan. Looking at the different clusters again, the prairie lots are these octagonal divisions, which have an auto court, or what we might call a cul-de-sac, but a little bit different in the sense that it's more of a roundabout with an open space in the middle. It's not a true cul-de-sac, which is 100% paved, but large hexagonal lots radiating from that center point, and fairly dense, fairly traditional development, probably on the realm of 6 density units per acre, whereas we're looking at more like between 2 and 4 density units per acre around the station village, but quite a bit of open space featured as part of the station village as well, in addition to the condominiums and mixed use that is located at the station itself. This metro station has an abundance of parking for commuters coming from all around, because this does service several stops for folks traveling in to and from the loop in Chicago. Looking to the north, we can see the original farmstead and stables, as well as additional residential clusters, the meadow lots, arranged in this very, very interesting quadrangle of space. Abundance, again, of open space and of hedgerow and orchard, creating out a series of these different outdoor rooms, which makes the development really unfold as you move through it, but also some interesting points of landmark and prospect and refuge as you look at these different lakefront lots and lakefront views, as well as recreational and outdoor space recreation opportunities, in addition to more commercial opportunities with the small village center here in proximity to the future park and future school site. Here it is. A couple of years ago, we can see the meadow with quite a bit of water and retention, trails and walking routes. One of the original farmsteads located here. Station Square fully built out. Prairie lots fully built out, 4 clusters of prairie lots. The village center fully built out, as far as I'm aware, every lot has been occupied, and there is interest or waiting list in additional purchasing for the future. You can see the station is here with only about a third of the parking that was planned for it, so that may have implications for how popular that station is. You can also see the village center was not fully built out in terms of its full plan, but the residential lots were fully built out with some additional higher density condominiums and apartments within walking distance of the station itself. Here's another view of it in a more of an aerial perspective view. We can see the charter school located in part of the village center, the original Prairie Crossing farm to the north, as well as this additional homestead, as well as the wetlands and the lake. And you can again see how the hedgerows do help divide up and create a series of outdoor rooms, outdoor zones, as well as tillable farmland still being operated in portions of the property as well. Tillable farmland also to the northwest and to the east. Here we are a few years ago. A lot of CAP alumni in that picture. This is, I believe it's approximately 2008, 2009, when we were able to make a visit as part of the CAP first year Chicago field trip. So we spent a few minutes there at Prairie Crossing. This is inside of Station Square, the densest portion of the southern part of the development. Playgrounds and native plants. So mixture, when we see open space, there's a mixture of manicured lawn as well as native prairie grasses. Most of the houses are American craftsmen in style, but at a very high quality and very a clear pattern book that brings them all together, makes them very consistent. Some of the wetlands are bounded by prairie grasses as well. This is to attract wildlife as well as capture, retain, and polish some of the stormwater runoff that they experience on the site. The lake has a small beach with paddle boats and canoes, part of the recreational amenities of the development, as well as a paved terrace and some outdoor seating, all connected by walking trails. The original farmstead is part of a charter school to the north, so a number of folks from around the area do send their kids to school at this particular charter school, which I believe has a Montessori model or a experiential learning model. To New Urbanism, we have a fantastic development in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Mount Pleasant is just east of Charleston, located very close to Charleston Bay, between the Atlantic Ocean and the Charleston Bay Inlet. Mount Pleasant is very similar to Carmel, Indiana, in terms of real estate and wealth and development standards. So some interesting comparisons between Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and Carmel when it comes to that level or that quality or that standard of development. Ion is a new urbanist development planned by DPZ Co-Design, formerly known as Duane Plater Zyberg Associates, out of Miami, Florida. The layout is basically around two marshes. You can see salt marshes to the north, Howball Creek, which is part of the watershed, and you can see long docks that connect housing developments to the south to the edge through the edge of the salt marsh and into the creek. So a lot of interesting ecological systems happening here at sea level or near or below sea level. As some of you know, Charleston is at sea level and is certainly a community that is threatened with sea level rise. So dealing with water and dealing with runoff, capturing and polishing that runoff, and working with the land at sea level is important. So water is a big feature in this particular development. The quality of the open spaces, the commercial core, the village center has a very, very clear 19th century European feel, maybe inspired by Italy or Spain. Plants that create abundance of shade and opportunities for shade in the hot, wet climate of South Carolina. Housing is consistent in the sense that it has a very strict form-based code following different steps of a transect. Transect meaning different densities. So this may very well be multifamily housing. This could function as single-family housing, as sort of a mansion or villa, but it also could serve as three flats or three-level walk-up, as we might call it in Chicago, a three-up or three-level walk-up with a combination of three flats on top of each other, verandas or terraces facing the water in the bay, and maybe some shared amenities in between the houses or at base level. Those row houses then flank each side of the retention ponds and create some microclimate features in the sense that that air that passes over the water can be captured as breezes into the verandas and into open windows or shaded windows. A lot of interesting 19th century climate response features in this colonial revival type of architecture, which is common throughout Florida and the Carolinas, inspired by the English bungalows that were brought here in the 17th and 18th century, and inspired also from other colonial architecture from around the world in terms of how it responds to sun and shade, how it responds to capturing breezes, and how it responds to how porches and verandas can create a habitable open space or connections between the interior and exterior space on extremely hot days. So lots of inspiration from around the world that comes into what we might call Southern colonial or colonial revival architecture. Some folks call it the antebellum style of architecture, and that it is reminiscent of a lot of the vernacular housing of the 17th to 18th century mansions and homesteads across the South. But that extension of the exterior space into the veranda allows for ample shading as well as capturing of breezes coming off of these lakes and ponds. Very interesting microclimate responses there. Another form of new urbanism is the village of West Clay, which borders or is in between Carmel and Zionsville, Indiana, by the Brentwood Development Corporation. Very interesting part of the Carmel Metroplex between Carmel and Zionsville. Easily visited, easy distance from Muncie or Indianapolis if you want to take a visit. A lot of inspiration from English, traditional English villages, as well as borrowing names from across Britain, names like like Brentwick, and names like Grenville and Trowbridge. So a lot of English country inspiration going into the layout of this development, as well as the names, as well as some of the architecture. Again, because of the water table here in central Indiana, an ample number of ponds and retention ponds which have to be aerated or have fountains in them to continue aeration. We have a village center or village green flanked by a town hall and some mixed use, so there is a brewery and a restaurant, as well as some smaller commercial uses in the village center, which represents a 5-minute walking radius and a 10-minute walking radius to most of the development. Walking trails and complete streets that connect all of the different ponds and allow folks to walk and bike throughout the development. I believe there may also be a charter school, I'm not sure. Yes, there is a charter school as well. And quite a bit of community development, community organizing as well around newer development issues as this particular development starts to fill out. It is nearly complete comparing the master plan to where they are now, with a diversity of housing types and housing styles. Most of the housing does follow a strict form-based code with housing styles that predate World War II, mostly what we might call colonial revival, Cape Cod, Georgian revival, Greek revival, and American craftsmen. So a good range of those housing styles, with mostly front porches that face the working streets, but a lot of ample sidewalks, trees, plants, and frontages. Very attractive landscape in which to take a visit and take a walk. Some of the denser housing constitutes row homes. In this case, the garage is located in the back and is at the basement level, and then one parks their car and walks up into the housing unit. So there's an auto court behind this row of houses in which the garages are available. Cars are then parked, and then folks walk up into the housing unit itself with large, ample porches that face a shared green space. Some of the denser portions of the development itself. The commercial core has some additional upper floor housing and or office space, including Brentwick Development's headquarters, but also a couple of restaurants and a brewery that have really flourished there as being walkable to a good portion of the development and surrounding areas. Some of the retention ponds and some additional views of the commercial core, really reminiscent of Indiana at the turn of the century. This Italianate style of architecture is found across a lot of Indiana small towns, and so the desire to revive and to keep that 19th century image and that 19th century quality and color schemes and material palettes is very desirable and noticeable here, is really celebrating and reminiscing of that 19th century, late 19th century boom in Indiana cities when the railroad and natural resources were really making small towns across the state boom with new industry. The town hall is reminiscent of a New England town hall or a British village town hall, and so that is a place of assembly and democracy. So the folks are organized with a very clear village association, and so they have regular meetings. And then the formal village green with the band shell, place for weddings and receptions and other outdoor events. More of the row houses and more of the terrace houses. We can see these allées that connect different portions of the development, but also good view of how the auto court is handled. There's a grade change from a small slope between one street and another, which allows the developers to scoop out, create auto courts, and then allow basement level garages to allow folks to park and then walk up into their units. In these cases, most of the parking is on street for these condos or these what they might be called villas. Each of these, I believe, is one address, or it may also be each of these may also be apartments. Very flexible development type here in the sense that could be 1, 2, 3, 4 addresses in the sense of 4 attached houses. It could also very well be 6 apartments connected with center staircases. Very flexible development type, and then it could be apartments or row houses or townhomes. Over to the concept of an eco-village. This is Clockjordan in North Tipperary, Ireland. This is 2.5 hours west of Dublin, between the cities of Galway and Dublin. I was fortunate to visit there back in 2013 as part of a international conference that met in Dublin. This is one of our the possible day trips that we could take to visit this eco-village development. Eco-villages are defined by this document, the Eco-Village Challenge by Robert Gilman, 1991, defined by having a human scale. And what that means, what human scale means, is that the entire development is walkable and perceivable from a person's point of view, that one does not necessarily need transportation to take in the totality of the development, that a small child or an elder could very well walk and perceive the entire development in one stroll. Full featured means that all of the human needs can be met possibly on site. While eco-villages have interdependence with the greater economy, they also have some self-sufficiency in the sense that the ability to grow and produce food on site is possible. In which human activities are harmlessly integrated into the natural world. That does speak to the interdependence and connectivity of eco-villages, but also that the development does rely on a number of sustainable concepts, sustainable technologies, sustainable infrastructure, as well as food and energy production. In a way, they're supportive of healthy human development in the sense that total health, from physical, mental, and spiritual health, can be addressed by the village development and address all that totality of human needs without large commutes or large distances trafficked in order to meet every human need that is necessary. And that can be successfully continued into the indefinite future, that by the definition of sustainability, that this pattern of development can be continued into the foreseeable future, that it is economically sufficient, that it is economically interdependent, but that it can function as part of a greater economy with sustainable measures as opposed to harmful measures to the environment. So again, the human scale refers to a size in which people are able to know and be known by others. That sense of knowing one's neighbors, that a development or that a village is small enough that one can get to know everybody, and that one can feel participatory in the community's direction. So as a democratic participant, as a neighbor, and as one that is able to freely access all parts of the community, and whatever their ability and whatever their transportation method. So based on that definition, the upper limit for such a group is roughly 500 people. A full-featured settlement, all the major functions of normal living, from residential and food and participating in the economy are present in balanced proportions, and that they are divided by function. So all of the potential ways that one can participate in the economy, from business startup to makerspace to energy and food production, is available on site. That one does not require one to commute great distances in order to participate in the larger economy. That these functions can be accommodated on site, in which human activities are harmlessly integrated in the natural world, holding the ideal that the eco-village is in balance with other parts of life, and so reduction of waste, a reduction of the dominance over nature, more of a harmony within nature, involving native plants and the welcoming of other wildlife into the community. A very, very interesting ideal being prescribed here in terms of how human activity are harmlessly integrated. And again, to recap here, genuine human health, addressing physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs, all within a walkable scale. So those needs are accommodated within the context of the village, not requiring commuting of great distances for those different health needs. And that can be successfully continued in the indefinite future. So to be harmoniously integrated into nature and to be full-featured, but also not creating unsustainable activities elsewhere, and being accommodating to both young and old on either side of the economically productive age groups, to be age inclusive and to be walkable and accessible to multiple populations. Again, we are here in the British Isles, right kind of sort of in the south central portion of the island of Ireland, with Galway and Limerick, and with Dublin nearby. You can see Ireland here in the context of the southern half of the British Isles. And again, we were about 2.5 hours from Dublin, so this particular excursion took us out of Dublin and along the M7 through the countryside to Clockjordan, almost to Galway, which is on the west coast of Ireland. Clockjordan began as a charity or non-profit, basically out of a protest movement. And they chose this existing village because it was primarily an agricultural village that was in decline, with the production of cattle and dairy nearby. Very rich farmland in this portion of Ireland, but the village was chosen because it had existing built fabric, it had an existing community, even though it was economically very much in decline or struggling. But the idea that they could plug into an existing built fabric with an intact village center, as well as the existence of 3 churches and a school, was desirable, rather than to be completely isolated. The founders of Clockjordan saw an opportunity to plug in to an existing community of about 200 or 300 people. What's important to note, though, is that for most Irish, the dream of owning one's home is typically an attached home, is typically a townhome. So this is a level of density that we're not used to in the United States, except in denser centers. To see attached housing in a rural context is somewhat surprising, but it is the norm for folks in this part of Ireland, and for whom home ownership means having an attached home or an attached townhome. And that was an exception. That was an exception that they really wanted to investigate in this part of the development, that one could actually build and own a detached home as opposed to an attached home. So what is the norm for Ireland was considered even denser by standards of the new development. In the older parts of the village, looks something like this. There may be a mixture of land uses or a mixture of residential. You can see folks, their main address, walk up directly from the street itself, and then there may be some businesses on that first floor, but very typical view of the traditional village, and always folks sitting out and saying hello to folks as we walk by. Here's our group here starting to walk through the village and visit the local pub before descending into the EcoVillage itself. So again, this existing village fabric was chosen because it had some things that one could plug into an existing grocery store, market, an existing pub, 3 existing churches, and an existing school that they could integrate in part of the development. So 67 acres was available. Original plan was for 130 houses, and at the time of this slide presentation, 2013 to 2014, 50 dwellings were built at that time. I've linked some additional videos to Canvas if you want to take a look at those, give you a little bit more background in history and current conditions in the village of Clockjordan. If we take a look at the aerial, this is the 67-acre farm with a plug-in or one lot removed that connects to the main street. So very interesting choices made here by the master planners to connect to the existing house, to existing housing, existing school, existing churches, becoming noticeable landmarks, but all part of what Clockjordan was intended to plug into and utilize as part of its development. But this is the 67-acre lot just to the north of the existing village. You can see a rugby pitch or Gaelic football or hurling pitch to the south as well. Here we are today. We've got the combination of workplaces, fab lab, solar array, community gardens, the existing housing, about 50 or 60 houses that have been built, a youth hostel, the existing pharmacy, grocery store, museum, artist studio, and the 3 churches that remain part of the village fabric. So at full build out here in 2020, I think we're at about 60 or 65 houses, as well as the additional energy production, orchard, food production, community garden that add to the village's mission. Here's the original master plan from the planner, urban designer, called Soul Earth, which is a Dublin-based practice. If and when it's at full build-out, original plan was for 120 to 130 homes, as well as a considerable amount of open space, community garden, orchard, and other food production portions to the development, as well as a small solar farm and a wood chip furnace that provides central heating to the village itself. A view of the model with the existing buildings in gray, and then with proposed buildings in brown and red, as well as revitalization of the original farmstead and the original orchard. And again, you can see how that plugs in to the main street, that the whole village emanates from one plug-in, one building facade, if you will, or one lot that actually aligns onto the main street itself. A CAD plan here showing all of the allotments, and then the 67-acre farm fully developed with housing and all of the farmstead and farming functions. Some aerial perspective sketches from the architect and urban designer, Soul Earth, of what the development might start to look like at full build-out. Some SketchUp and Photoshop renderings, a little crude but effective in terms of communicating the intentions of some of the sustainable technologies on site, from wind and solar, as well as wood chip and other sustainable energies. I've paired the rendering with the photograph as it looked in 2013 as best I could. Pretty good guessing here, just in terms of how things were intended from the architect, urban designer, to full build out. including bioswales, which respond to rainfall and do fill up with substantial rainfall, functioning as large-scale rain gardens, or what we might term bioswales, minus the ducks and geese. Native woodland, 1,700 trees, organic farm and orchard, managed by a community nonprofit. Permaculture that experiments with composting and the reuse of chicken dung. And some folks, as you can see, are raising chickens on their residential lot. Interesting mixture of what we might term traditional farmhouse and more European modernism. There is a pattern book that the architect, urban designer did make. Every house is intended for planning approval, but there have been some liberal interpretations of the form-based code. Other garden allotments and polytunnels, what we might term a greenhouse, they call a polytunnel, for food production on each residential site. So here's one resident growing a substantial number of their own food, as well as hosting some animals, might be chickens or goats, in a backlot environment, surrounded by native plants or native grasses. You can see a mixture primarily of passive and active solar technology built into each of the homes. Business startup, there is a business hub that is designed specifically for business startups, so high-speed internet connection, as well as meeting space and opportunities for small business and makerspace on site. This is building and just to the north central portion of the plan that was funded by the Irish government with assistance from the EU, the European Union. Wood chip and solar array. So wood chips are harvested from reclaimed timber or felled timber, and then burned as part of a central heating array, and then that is backed up by a solar array, solar farm that provides energy directly into the development. So the houses and buildings do enjoy a central heating supply based on the burning of wood chips that is backed up by a solar array as well. Mixed-use nodes for retail and socialization. A couple of nodes are built into the community that have a little bit higher density stuff, which might include live-work situations or the ability to run a small business out of the first floor and live above it. Not terribly high density, but most of these are detached homes, as opposed to the row houses that we see in other situations in the Irish countryside. But these smaller nodes do allow for some small business or live-work opportunities around them. And again, this mixture of European modernism and some vernacular revival styles, all approved by the local planning authority. We were very fortunate in our group to have the lead planner from the county of Tipperary assist us and guide us through the community. He is also a resident of the community, so he had the entire plan book with him in terms of how each house and each building went through a development review process. 32-bed youth hostel and outreach centers, so students from all over Europe, high school students and college-age students come from all over Europe can come and study or take tours through the community to learn more about sustainable living and sustainable technologies and sustainable agriculture practices on site. That 32-bed hostel conveys amenities for visitors from all over Europe and over the world. Strong emphasis on cottage industries or live-work industries, or things that you can produce at home or in a live-work situation. Of course, now in COVID-19, that ability to work from home or produce things at home is becoming more paramount and more noticeable. One of the first businesses to open at Clockjordan was a bakery which ships bread all over the island of Ireland, but has a central bakery and then shipping throughout the island itself. And then a strong architectural emphasis on what we might call the vernacular look or timber frame look, as well as cob or adobe and passive solar technologies. Again, some examples from the development manual or the form-based code what the local planner uses to enforce a development review standard. Very interesting. It was very interesting to me that these were all hand drawn. Very surprised. I was quite surprised to see that, but this was essentially becomes the development manual, or a manifestation of a form-based code given by the master planner / architect / urban designer for the county planner to use to enforce and engage development review. So when folks want to build a building in the development, they compare it against this book, and then it is approved or disapproved. So quite a bit of enforcement on the form of the county planner, but given great guidance from the architect, urban designer, in terms of the plan book, development book, or form-based code which he is in fact enforcing. Here's a young family that was given the opportunity to build their own house. One of the things that was encouraged here in Clockjordan is self-building, and so this family here is using a combination of cob and mud and straw to build a European form, what we might call adobe here in the United States, but it's called a cob wall in the sense that it is a mixture of mud, possibly dung, and a great bit of straw in a self-build kind of construction. So this family was in fact working on their own house as we were visiting. It's also mixed with timber frame. So the timber frame is set up, and then the cob wall is filled in to create a very high resistance value, or R value, in terms of the ability to insulate the home. And the family will probably either use wood heat or connect it to the central heating. As I mentioned, though, this connection to the vernacular, we've got a combination of sod, roof, and clapboard, and then plaster, probably cob and plaster, giving a very futuristic but also very traditional look at the same time. Other homes, as I mentioned, resemble more European modernism, but the intention of the entire development is to really recall this traditional Irish vernacular architecture that is very close to the land and very sustainable with the land and climate. Remnants of the original farmstead from the 18th, 19th century become part of the development, and so those ruins, if you will, of the original farmstead are interesting functions of the community, and part of the walking trails, and part of the orchard, part of the productive landscape that remains there. Another development type we call net zero development. One of the finer examples that I know of is called the Beddington Zero Energy Development, also known as BEDZ, in Surrey, England. Surrey is just south and west of London. And BEDZ is one of the first examples of a denser form of urban townhomes or urban housing, probably 12 to 14 density units per acre, but which uses a combination of passive and active solar and wind technologies, as well as active bioremediation, in the sense that all of the sewage waste coming from the housing is recycled and remediated as fresh water. So you have a living machine here as part of each of the blocks. You have green roof, you have passive solar, we have active solar, we have wind vanes here that react to the wind and create a chimney effect, pulling fresh air through each of the homes. We have active solar in the form of solar cells, terraces here, creating chimney effect and bringing fresh air through, and really reacting to the South England climate, being able to harmonize with the climate of that portion of the British Isles, and integrate a number of passive and active sustainable technologies. This cutaway isometric starts to show a lot of the different sustainable technologies that are on site. But a very different type of townhome in the sense that there's a combination of upper and lower floor residential, and that this could be, again, function as a complete row house, or also as 3 different units, as well as live-work units. Some more cutaway diagrams of the different sustainable technologies. including foul water treatment and electricity to the grid, connected to a biofuel producer, which creates hot water and electricity, photovoltaic panels from the sun, wind-driven ventilation with heat recovery, so creating that passive effect or that chimney effect, rainwater collection into rain barrels and cisterns. First of its kind in England, I believe BedZ 2 was built in Brighton, which is south of London, and I believe that the model itself will be exported to other countries shortly. Food as community development. This is a project that Professor Truex and myself worked on with Cara Media Associates and the Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development a few years ago. Carrier Bryant site is 17 acres just north of IUPUI's campus and south of Marian University's campus on the northwest side of Indianapolis. So Methodist Hospital is over here to the east. 16 Tech and IUPUI campus, as well as the former Bush Stadium site, are to the south. Rest of IUPUI is just south of the waterworks here. Marian University is to the north. Our site is right here, this L-shaped wedge of land. It's a 17-acre former Carrier Bryant furnace and HVAC factory right here, in which we were asked to create some visioning for a new Indianapolis food hub. Another view here, we're close to a what was the former IPS 44, now Global Prep Academy, and some worker housing, former worker housing folks who used to walk to work in this portion of Indianapolis. We also have a very large silo for soybeans just to the south. Aerial perspective, we did 3 different options or 3 different schemes. Aerial perspective, our proposed development, including large-scale, industrial-scale urban agriculture, farmers market, as well as some dense urban housing, as well as festival space, community gardens, and greenhouses. So our first scheme here has a village center, has a form of this roundabout connecting to existing streets, including Ghent Avenue, 23rd Street to the north, Birdsall Parkway to the north as well, with 2 large industrial-scale greenhouses, a garden center that has demonstration gardens and other composting, a value-added hub or food processing hub, so any food that is produced on site can be canned, packaged, and shipped from a food processing facility, a community center, a outdoor plaza, community gardens, as well as a host of greenhouses and orchard. Scheme B took some of the similar things, but some of the similar elements, including the orchard, the farmers market, the central plaza, the community center, but focused on veterans housing that also had productive greenhouses attached to them, as well as 2 very large industrial scale aquaponic greenhouses as part of its plan. So the 2 large-scale aquaponic greenhouses are here to the north. Our value-adding center or food processing center and shipping center with semi-trucks is located here, as well as a host of vermiculture beds, creating composting, as well as perhaps some animal pens in the form of goats or chickens, orchard, greenhouses, a garden center which services other folks. A lot of folks can do gardening and do education and germination and things of that nature at this garden center. More orchard over here, central plaza with a band shell, community center, education and outreach center, other community raised bed community garden beds, as well as some veterans housing in the form of this apartment block or townhome block. So incorporating a lot of the same elements, but just arranged in a different way, with a focus on veteran or senior housing integrated into the development itself. Scheme C, a little bit different, just the same elements, but rearranged a little bit differently. We can see a large aerial perspective here of the garden center with attached greenhouses and additional food production, and then veterans housing or dense affordable housing on site for folks who might be working on site. And you can see how we have arranged it with our numbers. It's a sliding scale of different amenities and with a smaller scale of industrial size aquaponic agriculture and more focus on the greenhouses itself. So 2 to 3 times more greenhouses than elsewhere in our other schemes. But we've calculated all the different housing units, jobs, and production of food per year. These are apartment blocks attached to greenhouses, so that might be row houses or terrace homes attached to additional greenhouses. And then these are called eco-farmsteads in the sense that this is a family living on individual lot, maintaining their own greenhouse and their own community garden or raised bed gardening as well. So a lot of different functions of urban ag on site, from traditional greenhouse to aquaponic to smaller scale aquaponic agriculture to an eco-homestead, what we call an eco-village homestead, or eco-homestead more appropriately, in which homeowners would buy in and produce food on site for market. The farmers market or central plaza is more or less located in this central portion of the village itself. It's supported by the garden center. We also did a series of isometric vignettes so that folks could understand what each of these components meant. While each of the plans was built up of several of the components, it was important to communicate to the public and to the city of Indianapolis what each of these components meant and what they might look like individually, and so we could start to see the master plan starting to fit together as a puzzle. So these are SketchUp models that we built and that we printed out and I traced over with colored pencil just to give more character and color to them. So it illustrates what the specialty housing looks like, what the maker spaces might start to look like. And then I did a series of these cutaway vignettes that show an interior view in the isometric view here of what a concept of urban ag operation might start to look like. And so these diagrams or vignettes or drawings were very important in communicating the values and the functions of each of these portions of the urban ag. They were also a lot of fun to draw. So from orchard to commercial greenhouse to senior living to urban animals or into retail and co-op grocery. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for taking in all of these different new development types, and I hope these were inspirational for you to think about as you consider a more sustainable living opportunity, more sustainable development opportunity for your assigned site. Thank you.